Is the slide visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Yeah. So we started with this outline, considering this is the outline for the first chapter, say. Um, I mentioned that in case of microeconomics, our objective will be on optimization and allocation. Okay. Actually, optimization is so important in context of microeconomics. I mentioned that a number of economists or a specific school of thought thinks that optimization is equivalent to rationalization. However, when I am telling this, there are many things in between. It's not that easy. However, you know, to begin with, we are considering every individual is selfish individual, and every individual will like to either maximize or minimize. Okay. So individual may like to maximize their utility subject to their income constraint, time constraint. Individual may be like to maximize output subject to the cost constraint, or individual may like to minimize cost subject to the total output constraint, or individual may like to maximize profit, individual may like to maximize revenue. So some kind of optimization the individual is doing, and that optimization is equivalent to their rational behavior. Okay. So later on, when the things will go on, we will learn about bounded rationality. We will understand whether this kind of optimization is really equivalent to rationality or bounded rationality, etc. So all these questions will come one by one. It is just introduction to begin with. We are trying to understand the objective of microeconomics is optimization and allocation. Just a minute. ক্লাসে আছে ক্লাসে আছে হ্যাঁ পরে And today I'll tell you something about allocation too. I didn't mention anything about allocation in the introduction. I'll mention something about allocation in today's class. Then what I did, I gave you the different definitions of the market. Actually, when we talk about the economic agents, when we talk about the optimization, as economic agents, mainly we concentrate on two types of agents. One is the group of demanders and another is the group of suppliers. So there is a body who actually consume the commodity, and there is a body who produce the commodity. Now, market is the place, as I mentioned, and as you know, where these both the parties will come and meet each other, and the transaction will take place. Now, while give the different definitions of the market, I mentioned about, the competitive market, the monopolistic market, the idea of monopoly, oligopoly, monopsony, and oligopsony. So if anyone have any question regarding the definitions of different types of markets, different examples of the market, etc., then I'll definitely ask the question during the break time. Now today I'm coming to the third issue. Okay, first, different units or different tools we use in context of microeconomics as measurement units. How we will measure, how we will measure the matters we discuss in context of microeconomics. So I'll talk something about the economic measurement. However, please remember, this is only the introductory chapter, so I'll be not able to cover each and everything. I'm trying to tell you what are the things we will use in context of microeconomics. Okay, so earlier I mentioned optimization. We will consider in context of microeconomics. I mentioned we will talk about consumers, we will talk about producers, When I'm talking about optimization, I'll talk about the constraint optimization, I'll talk about the unconstant optimization. Then while I introduced different types of markets, just I gave a very simple definitions of different possible types of markets. Okay, so there will be whole chapters on each of the things, so there will be a vast thing which we will discuss in all 3 semesters of microeconomic course. So now coming to the issue of measurement, you should remember there are 2 types of variables in context of microeconomics. Some variables we consider as stock variables, and some variables we consider as flow variables. Stock variables are those variables which are not measured with respect to time. Okay, so when I'm talking about price of the commodity, I'm not considering, price per day or price per month or price per year. So I'm not considering price in that way. So when I'm talking about the price, I'm talking about the current price. It's true. However, this we will consider as the stock variable because it is not reported with respect to time. Wealth and inventories are other 2 examples of stock variables. When I'm talking about the wealth holding of an individual, that individual may be as individual by definition or individual household or individual nation. I'm considering the wealth as a stock variable. Similarly, inventories, inventories is, the gap between the total production and total amount consumed. Okay, so at this moment, I have this much of output and this much consumed. So that total production minus consumption is the inventory. This inventory is considered as the stock variable. Now, there are certain variables which we always report with respect to unit of time. Okay, production per hour, production per month, production per week, production in a year. Okay, so production, consumption, income are these kind of variables. When I talk about income, income per day or income per month, that is important, or annual income. Okay. So the variables which generally we report with respect to time unit, that will be considered as the flow variable. On the other hand, the variables which are not reported with respect to time will be considered as stock variables. Now, there are 2 additional flow variables which will come again and again in our microeconomic analysis. One is expenditure and other is revenue. Expenditure is total amount consumed into price. I am consuming 2 oranges, so expenditure on orange is 2 into the price of orange. If every orange has the price of 10 rupee, in that case 10 into 2 is the expenditure on orange. Okay. Revenue is the production into price. Expenditure is the consumption into price and revenue is the production into price. Output produced multiplied with the market price gives us the revenue. Okay, so these 2 variables are very important and repetitively come in our analysis. These 2 variables are considered as flow variables. Now, when I'm talking about the prices, I mentioned about the price in context of microeconomics. Price is the most important measuring unit because, we will talk about the demand, we will talk about the supply. Everywhere price matters. So price is the most important measuring unit in context of microeconomics. Now, when I'm talking about the price, there are 2 types of prices, or price can be defined in 2 ways. The first is nominal price. It is the absolute price. It is the absolute price of the commodity. Okay, absolute price. Price of the commodity is 10 rupee. So 10 is the nominal price, absolute price. Now, for the economists, nominal price is not that important. For economists, real price is more important. Okay, so what is real price? The price relative to an aggregate measure of prices or constant dollar prices. It also measures prices relative to others. Price after adjustment for inflation. Okay, the last definition is the most important definition. Price after adjustment for inflation is the real price. So nominal price is telling about this is the price. Real price is telling about my purchasing power. Real price is telling about the purchasing power of the individual. Okay, so this is indicating the purchasing power because it is the price after adjusting the inflation. Okay, so we will try to understand the idea more clearly using the following definitions. So there is a notion which we call consumer price index, CPI, consumer price index. CPI is the total spending on a market basket of goods. There is a basket of goods and how much we are spending on this basket of goods. That is called the CPI, Consumer Price Index. Now, inflation rate, gross inflation rate, is defined as consumer price index in current period divided by consumer price index in the base period. So look at this thing. I'm comparing the consumer price index, that is actually what you are paying at this period for a basket of commodities, divided by, you should have a base year or the reference period or a reference year, reference time point. We have to consider the consumer price index for that reference time point. Now, in the morning, generally for the morning breakfast, we purchase bread, butter, eggs, milk. So our basket consists of these 4 items, say. And every day I'm spending, say, 100 rupees for this basket. It is November 2021. Suppose my reference period is 2015. Okay. So for 2015, we should be given the price of the same basket. So inflation rate of 2021 with respect to 2015 will be measured by CPI in 2021 for the breakfast basket divided by CPI 2015 for the same breakfast basket. So in this way, we will be able to estimate the gross inflation rate. Now, we mentioned that real price is the nominal price deflated by inflation rate. So if this is the definition of the inflation rate, the real price is nominal price in the current year deflated by inflation rate, that is the CPI current year divided by CPI base year. So using consumer price index and thereby calculating inflation rate, we will be able to get the value of the real price. So nominal price is the price which actually we are paying in the market, the absolute price. However, to us, nominal price is not that important. What is important? Nominal price deflated by inflation rate. which gives idea of the purchasing power of the individual. Any question? Any question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, how can we determine the base year?
How can we determine the
Base year CPI for the base
okay
year.
base year will be given by the planned economy, so every year you will get the budget. Every year you will get some bulletin from the national level, and that will tell us what will be our base period, what will be our reference period. Okay, so this reference period will be suggested by the statistical bureau or national economy of every country. Okay, so in this way it will be suggested, actually when there will be a major changes in the economy, before that period, generally statistical bureaus suggest that this is the reference period. So with respect to this reference period, we calculate all these changes. Okay, so individually we will be not able to determine which period will be the reference period. It will be given from the national level. Okay, so for any calculation, it will be told that this period should be considered as the reference period or the base period. Any other question?
Ma'am, about the nominal price.
What is nominal price?
Yes, ma'am.
This is the price, which you are paying in the market. The price which is written as MRP in the tag of the commodity. Absolute price you are paying. That is
Okay,
not
ma'am.
suggesting your purchasing power. Okay, so absolute price deflated by inflation rate is telling about the real price of the commodity. Okay, so we have to pay the amount which is written in the tag, or which is charged by the supplier, or which is written in the board in a market. So this can be presented in different way. However, we have to give it, we have to pay it to have the commodity. That price is called the nominal price. When we deflate the nominal price with the existing inflation rate, we get the real price. However, the real price is more important in context of economics because it reveals the purchasing power of the individual.
Ma'am, I had a doubt.
Yes.
Ma'am, real price tells us about the purchasing power of an individual, right?
Yes.
So, ma'am, we just studied that nominal price is like a lot influenced by the inflation in an economy, so it does not tell us about the purchasing power of an individual.
Yes.
But in the salary of people, we also get like dearance allowance, like that is influenced by the like just as inflation increases in the economy, people also like get an
Yes.
increase in their salaries.
I got your question. In the income, only for the salaried people, only a very small proportion in an economy like us, that is developing economy, you will find only a small proportion is getting the salaried income. You are right that we get the dearness allowances. However, this dearness allowances changes from one period to other, you know, because the inflation rate is changing. Okay, so suppose initially we consider 2010 as the reference period, and then we are for certain years we are calculating the inflation rate accordingly, and there is no change in the dearness allowances. It is not a regular change. Dearness allowances, change in dearness allowances is not a regular change. Okay, after certain period there will be change in the base, or there will be change in the reference period, because with respect to 2010, the inflation rate will look so high that we need to change the reference period. As we need to change the reference period and as we need to keep inflation at a target level, we have to improve the other side of the story as well. That is, we have to adjust the income to certain levels so that the purchasing power again starts from a particular level. Okay, so there is a continuous adjustment for the salaried people, after certain time periods, so that we can start with a particular level of purchasing power. Then again, because of inflation is a continuous thing. So because of inflation, again that purchasing power starts falling. When it falls to a certain level, again there will be some dearness allowances, etc. Okay, got the point?
Yes, ma'am.
So there is some adjustment definitely for the salaried people in terms of dearness allowances. However, that is not regular. And, we have to start from a particular purchasing power, targeted purchasing power. And for that matter, we adjust the other side, that is the income side, in that way. Good question.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I think you haven't taken my attendance. Can you mark me present, ma'am?
I think you joined late and therefore you remained absent.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So next, to understand the
Did
thing.
you take the attendance, ma'am?
Anything else? Are you saying something?
I was asking that did you take the attendance because I joined 10 minutes later.
Okay, so those who joined late, why you were without attendance while I'm teaching the thing?
Oh, he asked, that's why I had the doubt.
I didn't ask for any attendance. I waited till 10 minutes, for giving the attendance. So you will get the attendance for some other classes, not for this class. The CPI is calculated using the formula, cost of basket in current period divided by cost of basket in base period into 100. Okay, so we will calculate the CPI in this way. Cost of basket in current period divided by cost of basket in the base period into 100. Now, using the numbers for a simple example, the CPI can be calculated as $70 by $50 into 100 if the cost of basket in current period is $70, whereas if I consider a particular period as the reference period and the price in that period for the same basket is $50, CPI will be calculated in this way, so that we will be able to tell the CPI is 40% higher in the current period than in the base period. Okay, so CPI is calculated for each period with respect to the reference period. Now, if I consider the next period and the price of the same basket is $80, in that case, CPI will be $80 by $50 into 100. And we will be able to say that the CPI has increased by this percentage in this current period. Okay, so we have to consider the current period's CPI. We will deflate it by the base period CPI and will multiply it by 100 to understand what is the percent increase in price in the current period. Now, let's consider an example. I hope everybody has pen and paper. So, please write down the values and we need to calculate the real price. The real price is given in the rightmost column. However, we need to calculate it. So, I'm considering the college tuition fees in 1970. Now the nominal price the students used to give, that is 2,530 say in 1970. And consumer price index is 38.8. Here we are considering 1970 as the base year or the reference year. Then we are finding that students are paying rupees 12,018 in the period 1990. And the consumer price index is 130.7. Consumer price index is given by, again, the central part of the economic system. In our case, Reserve Bank of India, every year, and this, gives us, this is the consumer price index for this economic year or this financial year. For this financial year, this is the CPI. So Reserve Bank of India gives us CPI for every financial year. So like Reserve Bank of India, in our case, in every country, there will be a central economic system which will tell us this is the CPI for this financial year. So for 1990, the CPI is given by 130.7. For 2002, CPI is given by 181.0. So given the nominal price and given the CPI, we need to find out what is the real price. What is the real price? Okay. So what we will do, what will be the steps we need to do to get the real price from nominal price? Anyone?
Nominal price
Nominal price
divided
divided
by
by inflation rate.
Nominal price divided by inflation rate will give us real price. So what we need to calculate? That is nothing but the inflation rate. So would you please calculate the inflation rate for 1990? How we will calculate the inflation rate for 1990?
CPI of 1990 divided by CPI of 1970.
Very good. CPI of 1990 divided by CPI of 1970. So please do that and find out the inflation rate at 1990. Find out the inflation rate at 1990. Yes, Orpon, why you raised the hand?
Ma'am, in the year 1970, how can we calculate the CPI? Because the current year and the base year both are same.
That will be one, I guess.
CPI, you don't need to calculate for 1970. 1970 is the base period. Look at the thing. For 1970, nominal price is the real price. So we have to calculate it for 1990 and 2002.
Ma'am, in
Look
the year
at
1970, it is given
table.
CPI is 38.8.
Yes. So what is the inflation rate for 1990? Sitting at 1990, what will be the inflation rate?
Ma'am,
How we will calculate?
3.36.
I didn't get you.
3.3685.
3.3685. So it is 130.7 divided by 38.8. 130.7 divided by 38.8. Remember that for the base period, nominal price is exactly equal to the real price. Because I'll consider that period is the reference period. So no inflation is there. So compared to that year, I have to calculate the inflation rate. So for 1970, you don't need to do anything. For 1970, everything is given. So first we are calculating the inflation rate for 1990, which is 130.7 divided by 38.8. And who are you who told it is 3 point something?
Ma'am, Niladri.
Niladri. And Niladri has correctly pointed out the value is 3 point something. Take it up to 2 decimal places. Okay, so in that case, Niladri, what is the value? 3.39.
Sorry, 3.37.
3.37. Okay, 3.37. So everybody, I hope is getting that value, 3.37.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so once you get the inflation rate, you find out the real price of tuition fees. How we will do it? How we will derive the real price from the nominal price?
Ma'am, 12018
Nominal.
divided by 3.36.
Yes, 12,018 divided by 3.37 or 3.36, whatever. The value may not match perfectly because we are making some adjustment in the decimal place. However, it will be very close to this.
Ma'am, it is coming 3566.
3566, okay, it's fine. 3566. And then we have to consider it for 2002. So everybody is getting the value to be 3566.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So if you look at this line from compared to 1970, okay, now first you calculate it for 2002 and then I'll tell this sentence. So next you are calculating it for 2002. For 2002, how you are calculating the inflation rate?
Nominal price of 2002 divided by inflation rate.
Yeah, how you are calculating the inflation rate?
CPI of 2002 divided by CPI
181
of.
divided by 130.7.
Yes, ma'am.
No, 181
38.8.
38, because your reference or base period is 1970 only. Isn't it?
It will be 181 divided by 38.8.
181 divided by 38.8. So inflation rate should be calculated with respect to the base year, reference year. So I hope you are getting the value roughly 4.66.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So once you get this value, you will be able to find out the current price. So it is 18273 divided by the inflation rate.
Ma'am, it is coming 3921.
3921, fine.
Ma'am, I am getting 3917 if I'm dividing it like up to three places.
Yeah, I mentioned, So if you don't adjust the decimal place, you will exactly get these values. However, our purpose is to learn the things, So if we consider up to 2 decimal place, there will be a little bit changes in the values. Okay, so what is the picture? So if we look at the current, tuition fees the students are giving for taking admission in a college, we are finding that it is 7 times compared to the 1970. However, actually it has not increased up to that level. If we look at the real price, okay, real price is increasing only by 1.5 times. Okay, so rationality is the first important point in context of economics. Okay, so rationally we have to judge the changes. Okay, so if tuition fees increases from 1,000 to 5,000, other people may shout, but you have to calculate it or check it what has happened with respect to the reference period. Okay, when actually these 1000 tuition fees were studied. So that period may be considered as the reference period. And then if we calculate the inflation rate and then we, look at the tuition fees once again, or the real price of the tuition fees, maybe you may find that actually tuition fees has decreased. Okay, so looking at the fees hike from 1000 to 5000 should not be considered as there is a big jump, 5 times jump, etc. for an economist. You have to look at the real price with respect to the reference period, that is the period when we started to give 1000, what has been changed in the inflation rate in the current period. And then we have to readjust the tuition fees in terms of the real price, and we have to find out what has happened. Okay, so you have to do the things in this way, or you have to rationalize the things in this way. So these two concepts, the nominal or the absolute price and the real or the purchasing power, real price or the purchasing power, these two are very important concepts. Most of the microeconomic analysis will be based on the real price rather than the absolute price. Okay, so with respect to these ideas, now we are coming to the notion of relative price. Now, in case of microeconomics, generally, we consider the price of one commodity with respect to price of the other commodity. So we have said two commodities X and Y. Okay. Always you will find that we are not talking about separately about PX, or we are not talking about separately about PY. Rather, always we are talking about PX by PY. Okay. So the relative price is very important in context of economics. Price of one commodity expressed in terms of the price of other commodity. And this price of other commodity is considered as numerical. Why we do this? PX by PY. Why we consider this? Because the price of the other commodity is considered as numerical. Now, what is numerical? Commodity or good in terms of which all other prices are expressed. For example, say gold price. Gold is a commodity. Gold price creates the reference price. Okay. So if there is a change in the price of gold, prices of all commodities, all services will change in an economy. Okay. So gold is considered as a commodity whose price will be considered as the reference price. Okay. In finance, we consider everything in terms of US dollars. US dollar is considered as the reference price. So every currency, every country has different currency, and every currency is compared with respect to the US dollar. Okay. So there is no meaning of 1 rupee. There is a meaning of 1 rupee with respect to $1. Okay. Or there is a meaning of 1 pound with respect to $1. So always you need some commodities for which we will consider a standard price, for which will be considered as a standard commodity, or some exchange rate which will be considered as the standard exchange rate. So with respect to that exchange rate, or with respect to the price of the concerned commodity, we have to consider the prices of rest of the commodities. So the price of the commodity which we are considering as the reference, or the exchange rate which we are considering as the reference, is called the numerical. So if I consider price of X with respect to price of Y, or price of Y with respect to price of Z, say, in that case, in the first case, price of Y is considered as the reference price, or Y is considered as the commodity with respect to what we will measure the prices of rest of the commodities. So it may be Y, it may be Z, if price of Z is considered as the reference price, in that case, price of rest of the commodities should be considered with respect to price of Z. So in an economy or in context of microeconomics, we are interested about relative prices rather than absolute prices. In the denominator, we consider the price of a standard. That may be in terms of commodity like gold, or that may be fixed in terms of an exchange rate like US dollar. In general, what we consider to make the entire analysis easy, what we consider the numerical value we consider to be equal to 1. So when we are telling that price of the commodity is Px, remember that this is Px with respect to price of some other commodity or price of some other, exchange, or this is the rate with respect to some fixed exchange rate. That fixed exchange rate or that commodity price we are keeping at the value 1 so that we can present the price as Px, price of orange, price of apple, etc. Okay, so loosely we are defining price of X. Actually, it is price of X divided by numerator, where numerator has been kept at the value equal to 1. Got it? The idea of numerator and relative price? Any question? Okay, so next we are moving to the economic analysis. Okay, I mentioned that in the first chapter we will talk about 4 points. So now I'm coming to economic analysis. However, I'll again go back to the idea of allocation as well. Entire economic analysis is broadly, microeconomic analysis is broadly divided into 2 parts. The positive analysis and the normative analysis. Positive analysis tells us, if this is the cause, this will be the effect. If price increases, demand falls. If price increases, supply increases. If price increases, profit increases. So all this kind of causal cause and effect kind of relationship. There is no value judgment issue in context of positive economics, whether it is good to increase the price of this kind of commodities because this is a basic need. That is, when I'm talking about price of milk is increasing, in the analysis of positive economics, no way it will come that whether it is good to increase the price of milk. Okay, or if I consider price of, tobacco is increasing, again we will talk about demand for tobacco will fall, supply of tobacco may increase. So we will talk about all these things in case of positive economics. Whether it is good, it should be done in this way, these points are not coming here. So side by side of the positive economics, we should consider another concept, whether it is worthy, whether it is reasonable, whether it should happen in this way, etc. So normative economics will help us to raise all these questions, whether it should go in this way or not. That is, we are incorporating the idea of value judgments in context of normative analysis. So after discussing the hardcore consumer theory, producer theory, market economics, we should consider the welfare economics, whether the things should go in this way or there should be certain changes for this kind of commodities, certain changes for this kind of services. All these issues will come. So all these things, that is our value judgment kind of thing, or the welfare concept, will come through this normative economics channel or normative analysis channel. Okay, so now since I talked about the positive part and the normative part, now again I am moving back to the issue of allocation. I started with, the optimization and the allocation. These are the main two philosophies of microeconomics. So now we are understanding there will be some real allocation in an economy, which will come through the positive economics channel. That is, this is the amount which the consumer will like to consume. This is the amount which producers will like to supply. And this is the type of market which will determine this much go with this community, this much go with that community. So all these things first we are discussing. Then we are coming to the issue whether this allocation is acceptable, socially desirable, maximizing welfare of the society or not. So first, we are getting some allocation through the positive economics channel, and then we are questioning whether this allocation is socially desirable, whether this allocation is welfare maximizing, etc. So now once again, we are moving back to the question of allocation, or moving back to the issue of allocation. Now suppose we have two persons, A and B. We have two individuals in an economy, A and B, and they are consuming only two goods, X, Y. So it is a two-person, two-commodity economy. It is the simplified version. There are two individuals, there are two commodities. Now here there are different allocations of two commodities, X and Y, among two individuals, A and B. A is getting X and Y by the amounts 4 and 6. B is getting 8 and 10, 8 amounts of X and 10 amounts of Y. Then A is getting 4-6 combination. However, B is getting 8-6 combination. Next, A is getting 2-10 combination, B is getting 10-2. And the final one is 2-10 vis-a-vis 5-5. Okay, so these are different possible allocations, what the positive economics is suggesting, say, among two individuals, A and B, regarding the two commodities, X and Y. Now, if I look at the first two allocations, 4-6 vis-a-vis 8-10, in that case, we are understanding that B is better off compared to A, because B is getting more of both the commodities. B is getting more of both the commodities. Okay, so definitely B is well off compared to A. Now, if I look at this combination, both A and B are getting 6 units of Y. However, B is getting at least one commodity more. So again, B is well off. Now, in the third case, 2-10 vis-a-vis 10-2. So we will be not able to judge. The next is 2-10 vis-a-vis 5-5. We will be not able to judge. Okay. So what we are finding that we started to talk about interpersonal utility comparisons However, these interpersonal utility comparisons fail if we change the combinations like this. As long as we are keeping both the commodities higher, or at least one commodity higher, we will be able to go for relative ranking among the individuals regarding who is better off, who is worse off, etc. However, this kind of interpersonal comparison of utility fails if we come to these kind of allocations. Total allocation is changing like this. Okay. So economists first started with the interpersonal utility comparisons to understand whether one individual is better off compared to the other. However, this suffers from subjectivity and varies between persons, and therefore actually after certain scale it fails to identify who is better off in a society. And in this context, we need to bring the idea of normative economics. For value judgment, we need to consider the normative economics. Now,
Ma'am, can I ask a question?
yes.
Ma'am, this is assuming that price of both good X and Y are equal, right?
No, it is not considered in that way. Price of X and Y, there is a starting price of X and Y, and we are considering all the combinations for that starting point price of X and Y. Okay, we are controlling for all the parameters like prices of the commodities, income of the individuals, etc. Okay, so when we are just putting two individuals with different combinations of X and Y, we are considering there is full information about the commodities to the individual. Number one, prices of X and Y are given from outside, and this remain fixed for both the individuals under all the contexts. We are considering that both the individuals have similar income, okay, so that they can purchase these units of X as well as this amount of Y. Otherwise, we will be not able to go for interpersonal utility comparison for, this kind of baskets. So all these things are constant. In a ceteris paribus situation, that is PX, PY, income, all these things are remaining unchanged. In this context, okay, we are comparing this kind of combination of the bundles. Got the point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Ma'am,
so
can you repeat?
Which part?
Ma'am, last part which you explained.
What I said that, somebody raised the question that, what is the price of X, what is the price of Y? Naturally, because 2, 10, 10, 2, if the price of Y is lesser, price of X is higher, so how we will consider all these things, etc. I think that these things came in the mind of her. However, when I am considering the two individuals A and B, and I am considering two commodities X and Y, what I am telling that there is complete information regarding the nature of X and Y, regarding the prices of X and Y to both the individuals A and B. Price of X and Y are externally given. Income of the two individuals are similar. So in this context, we are presenting the combinations of the two commodities X and Y for the two individuals that I mentioned. Okay. Otherwise, the interpersonal comparison will be not well at all. If I consider, changes with respect to everything, in that case, interpersonal utility comparison will be not feasible at all. We can compare two individuals if other things are similar among the individuals that I mentioned. Okay.
Okay, ma'am, got it.
So I mentioned that in this context, the normative economics entering to judge, whether this allocation is better, this allocation is good, this allocation is worse, etc. Now, there are different layers of development of the normative economics as well. However, the economist, who is most remembered in this context, okay, or whose idea will create our starting point is no one but Vilfredo Pareto. In 1906, Pareto told that Pareto optimality is a state reaching where it is impossible to improve one state without reducing that of other. That is, we are changing the combination of the commodities among individuals. We are keeping 10 to then, say 9, 7. We are giving different combinations of the commodities, okay? And we are trying to judge the relative positions of the two individuals with respect to their satisfactions, So when we will be not able to improve the satisfaction of one individual without reducing that of the other, that allocation will be considered as the optimum allocation. Okay, so it is improving one states without reducing that of other. Okay, so Pareto optimality is a state reaching where we have reached to that allocation of the commodities. It is impossible to improve one's state without reducing that of other. It can be in terms of utility, it can be in terms of output, it can be in terms of cost, it can be in terms of profit, whatever, revenue, whatever. So it is a state, we will consider that state as the optimum state, starting from where it is impossible to improve one's position without reducing that of other. Okay. However, it was a benchmark in the economic analysis, microeconomic analysis for a longer time, We thought that this is the best solution. This is Pareto optimum is the best solution because it is the state, after which if you want to improve the welfare of one individual, that you have to do with some cost with respect to other individuals. Okay. However, later economists marked that Pareto optimality or Pareto criterion cannot be the best criterion. Let me finish. Cannot be best criterion to mark whether this is the best position or not, because there are several situations which are Pareto non-comparable, just there are multiple criterion to judge whether one individual is better, one individual is worse, and if there are multiple criterion, it will be really, really very difficult to understand whether reducing these, somebody's position remains unchanged, somebody's position is falling. So if there are multiple criteria, it is really difficult to understand if I make certain changes in this, whether the satisfaction will go down for one individual or multiple individual. So it is absolutely impossible to go for this kind of judgment if multiple criteria involved in a matter. Okay, so economists understood we are getting partial ranking under many circumstances using the Pareto optimality condition, or we are getting a number of situations which is Pareto non-comparable. We cannot compare the individuals, or we cannot compare the agents using the Pareto optimality condition. Okay, so in the entire third semester, third microeconomic course, you will get a lot of discussion about the welfare economics, Pareto optimality, etc., because it is a complex thing. Okay, to understand whether it is welfare maximizing, whether it is welfare reducing, whether the situation is Pareto optimum, whether Pareto optimality is equivalent to welfare maximization, or Pareto optimality is neither necessary nor sufficient to have welfare maximization. So lots of issues are there. However, to begin with, in the introduction, I'm mentioning that your journey for normative economics will start with the concept of Pareto criterion or Pareto optimality. Just I want to raise the point here. And in that context, I'm defining what is meant by Pareto optimality, and there will be a lot of debate regarding this Pareto optimality condition, whether it is welfare maximizing, whether it is not related to welfare maximizing, etc., etc. The next thing, next benchmark is given by Kaldor and Hicks. Kaldor and Hicks started to talk about the compensation principle. They started to tell that it is really very difficult to reach at Pareto optimum state, or really it is very difficult to satisfy every agents in an economy at a particular time point. So what we can do, if somebody has something more, there can be certain mechanisms in an economy which will adjust those excess amount and bring these excess amounts to the other people who do not have it. That is, we have to take away some additional amounts from a group, and we have to compensate the others with that amount. Now, how we will take away some amounts from a certain group, to answer to these questions, the idea of taxation, etc., came in an economy. Okay, so we can tax a group and we can subsidize the other group. So in that way, we can talk about a compensation. Okay, so there are people who have higher income, higher ability, so we can tax them and we can find out some resources out of that, and we can subsidize the other group who has lesser ability, lesser income, lesser power, etc. So Kaldor and Hicks in 1939, 1940, they started to talk about the compensation criterion, and in this way, actually, you can reach towards welfare maximizing situation. Somebody had some question. Quickly, please ask the question. Somebody had some question? Okay, so this is one thing. Another thing, we started with the rational choice theory, rationality, bounded rationality. So rationality, optimization, equivalent to rationality, selfish individual, to whom rationality means optimization. So we started from that point. So rational choice theory assumes that individuals, not apostrophe, can rank alternatives consistently. Now the question is, can we aggregate individual preferences to get a well-behaved collective ranking? The answer is no. So normative economics will help us to judge, or to answer to the question whether rational individual choices may lead towards well-behaved collective ranking. Under most of the circumstances, we will find, though at the individual level we considered the choices as rational, however, when we are considering the aggregative thing, when we are considering or looking at the society, if we consider the aggregate of these individual choices, however, it is not giving a collective, a well-defined or well-behaved collective ranking. Okay, so in this context, again, the idea of social choice evolved. Okay, so in the previous slide, I mentioned when we are going for the allocation, the individual level allocation or the allocation which we are getting out of optimality, that may not be socially desirable. So to benchmark, I mentioned the Pareto optimality and the compensation criterion given by Kaldor and Hicks. Then I am telling that whether rational choice can provide a well-defined collective ranking. The answer, under most of the circumstances, it cannot. So again, here also, we need to develop the idea of social choice separately. It is not that if individuals optimize, then we will get something which is socially optimum. We don't get in that way. Okay, so if I start talking about social choice, actually the idea of social choice came following this journey. At the initial level, powers were concentrated within a small group, as you know, kings, church, lords, etc. Those were the most powerful agents in an economy, and they decided everything. How much will be enjoyed by the state, how much will be enjoyed by the individuals, everything was determined by this small group, this powerful group. And then historically, if we consider the journey, we got the European Enlightenment, growth of liberal philosophy. Then we got the American War of Independence. In 1775 to 1783, we got French Revolution. So all of you did all these things in your school level history. You know all this journey. So as we moved from king, church, lords towards more liberal philosophy, as we got all these French revolutions, American War of Independence, we moved towards a democratic system. Okay, so coming to 1785, all political and economic leaders started to say that democracy is the best system. Okay, now if you say democracy is the best system, in case of democracy, the decision is taken using the majority decision rule, that is implementing the voting. Okay, implementing the voting. Okay, so coming around 1800, people started to understand, or people started to think that majority decision rule is the best rule in terms of social choice theory. So people will be asked to vote, and during the vote, they will present their independent choices, and following the majority votes, the things will be finally decided, because that will be the best for the society. Okay, so majority decision rule is the best rule. Still, we use this rule in case of elections in our country. Okay. Now, there is again certain limitations with respect to majority decision rules and voting. There is the issue like, chairman's paradox. Chairman can manipulate rules to ensure victory of his preferred option. Okay, so you are, I think all of you regularly check the media, getting newses, and I hope you understand this issue. There is a chairman's paradox in context of majority decision rule. Everything can be manipulated by the power, by the chairman. Then, the idea of strategic voting came. People do not vote for their best options. Rather, they try to understand which will be the direction, and accordingly they vote. A strategic voter casts her ballot so as to obtain the best outcome possible given her information, the voting rules, and her beliefs about how the other voters will behave. Okay, so you are not doing something which you think only optimal. You are considering all these factors. Okay, so you are using the information you have. You are considering the fact that your belief, what others will do. You are considering your ballot accordingly. Then we got Arrow impossibility theorem in 1951. Only dictatorship can generate a social ranking from consistent individual rankings. Okay, so Arrow told that there is no way apart from dictatorship which will be able to tell, this should be the social ranking considering the individual's ranking. Okay, so there is no social choice mechanism that simultaneously satisfies the Pareto condition, the independence of irrelevant alternatives condition, and the transitivity with unlimited domain condition, and is also non-dictatorial. Okay, now here I have used too many terms. Pareto condition, I hope you are understanding something. Pareto condition is indicating a condition starting from which, if I need to, or if I want to improve the position of somebody, that we can do at the cost of reducing welfare of others. Now, there is another term, independent of irrelevant alternatives. Anyone have any idea about this? IIA, independence of irrelevant alternatives? Anyone?
Ma'am, is this meaning the opposition?
No, it's no way related to the opposition. Okay, so let's try to understand the concept of IIA. Okay, so suppose there are 3 political parties, ABC. Okay, and total vote is considered as 100%. Okay, so suppose in the past election, this got 30%, these got 40%, these got 30%. Okay, so relative ratio between A and C. What is this? A is to C?
1. 1 is to 1.
1 is to 1. Okay. Now, in the current election, suppose these B party vanishes. Okay. So these 40, suppose this is not 100%, rather there is total 100 number of votes. Okay. So it may happen that all these 40 voters are going to C, all these 40 voters are going to A, or 20 going here, 20 going here, etc. Now, if I find 20 is going here, 20 is going here, in that case, the relative share of A and C in the next election is changing or not?
No, ma'am. Ratio is
No, ma'am.
remaining the same.
Ratio is 1:1.
Because it is for
1
50
is
is to
1,
40,
Ma'am,
then
the
1 is to
ratio
1.
stays the same.
same. Okay. So in the second election, it is 1:1. Okay. So if this happens, we can maintain this, if that is, if I remove B, then also the ratio between A and C remain unchanged. In that case, the choice between A and C is independent of irrelevant alternatives. B is irrelevant to both A and C. It is independent. It is independent of irrelevant alternative. Because whatever happens to be, the ratio between A and C, that remains unchanged. Okay. However, if we find that from 40, 10 is going here and 30 is going here, in that case, the position of A and C is changing, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. The ratio will certainly change.
Yeah. 40-60. Okay. So the relative position of A and C is changing. Okay. So 2:3. Okay. So it is affected by dropping of B. So it is not independent of what is happening with respect to B. Okay. So this is meant by, if I just simply try to understand the notion of IIA, independence of irrelevant alternatives, this is indicated by independence of irrelevant alternatives. If we remove some alternatives, whether the relative ranking between the others remain unchanged or it is changing. Okay, if it changes, it is not, independent of alternatives. If it does not change, in that case only, it is independent of irrelevant alternatives. Okay, so coming back to this slide, there is no social choice mechanism that simultaneously satisfies the Pareto condition, the independence of irrelevant alternative conditions, and transitivity with unlimited domain condition. Transitivity, I hope at least the people who joined the first two classes understand the meaning of transitivity. So would you please tell us what is the meaning of transitivity?
If A is preferred to B and B is preferred to C, then we say A is preferred to C.
Yes, that is the notion of transitivity. Okay, so transitivity conditions under most of the circumstances will be satisfied only with a limited domain. However, if you consider unlimited domain, all types of combinations, it is very difficult to satisfy the transitivity condition as well. The choices can be circular, the choice may follow different ways, So it is difficult to have transitivity if we consider unlimited domains. So Arrow marked all these limitations of strategic voting or majority decision rules. Arrow proved that if all these conditions hold, then only you can think about majority decision rule as the optimum rule of allocation. However, under most of the circumstances, all these conditions or some of the conditions will not be satisfied, and therefore the MDR will not be the best rule to determine what will be the optimum allocation for the society. Okay, then, in 1973-75, we are getting Gibbard is adding something: no system apart from dictatorship can prevent manipulation. So dictatorship is ultimately important. The political economy suggested that, the dictatorship is important to finally suggest this will be the optimum. This you need to accept, otherwise always there will be a chaos. Now another big is evolution. Yes,
Ma'am, in the last slide, can you explain the second last theorem once more, ma'am? I can't understand that actually.
arrow
No, ma'am,
impossible.
Yeah. Arrow impossibility theorem.
Arrow impossible. We are talking about the evolution of the journey of the normative economics, what you will learn in next few semester, etc. So I am telling that we started with king, church, lords historically. Then we faced a number of revolutions, and finally we came to the idea that majority decision rule will be the best one. You got this point?
Yeah, ma'am. Till this I understood.
Okay. Then we are finding that the economists or the philosophists or political thinkers, they are pointing that there are again certain limitations of the majority decision rule or the voting principle to determine this allocation is the optimum allocation. First point here, as the first limitation here, we are marking the problem of chairman's paradox. Chairman can manipulate. Then, there was some counter argument that voters may be strategic. If they find that there is some problems regarding the chairman, there is the existence of chairman's paradox. In that case, voters may follow certain strategies. So strategic voting principle came. Then Arrow again coming to the 1951, setting a benchmark in the theory. Arrow is telling that the strategic voting principle also will be not able to take care of the limitations of MDR or voting principle, because the MDR or the voting principle will really give us optimum allocation if it satisfies Pareto condition, if it satisfies independence of irrelevant alternatives condition, and if it satisfies the transitivity condition. However, it is almost impossible to find a socio-economic political situation which satisfies all these three conditions simultaneously. I gave you some example of IIA. Is there any rule that when you are discontinuing B, or the 40 will be broken in 2020?
There is no assurance.
Like that. There is nothing like that.
Yeah,
so
ma'am.
A is a very stringent condition. Pareto condition is a very stringent condition. Okay, so Pareto condition is incomplete, IIA is incomplete, transitivity, will be difficult to establish if you consider the unlimited domain condition. As long you are considering a limited domain, limited space, you can satisfy transitivity. Now, if you consider unlimited domain, again, the transitivity condition may not hold. So simultaneously having all these three criterion is a very, very difficult thing to get.
And what is the domain, ma'am?
Domain means space, domain is the term which we use in context of mathematics, the domain, the entire
Yeah.
range. Okay, that domain only.
Oh, that domain also.
That domain only, yeah. Okay, now you got it. So as
Little bit.
that, it is impossible to have something socially optimum if we do not consider dictatorship. Only dictatorship can generate a social ranking from consistent individual rankings. So individual rankings first we will look at, and then from the individual's ranking, there should be a dictator who will finally tell us this is the best for the society. Otherwise, if you leave it to the people, we will be not able to define anything, because, it is difficult to satisfy all three requirements simultaneously. Okay, so this is known as Arrow impossibility theorem. Without a dictator, it is impossible finally to suggest what will be the optimum for the society.
Okay.
Okay, and then
So, ma'am,
yeah.
is it suggesting that dictatorship is somewhat better than the democratic system?
Arrow found the thing in that way.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
so it is the evolution of the theory, as I am telling you. Okay. Okay, because in our system too, first we are giving the votes, etc. Okay, so if you just think about the election, so you are casting your votes, etc., to a political party, not to an individual. Okay, so you are giving this to a political party only, and then that party is deciding who will be the prime minister, who will be the chief minister, etc. And then they are defining certain rules, and the system is following that rule, those rules only, isn't it?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, so individuals are first casting their choices, and then somehow we are fixing somebody who is finally taking the decisions, and rest of the society is following that decision. Okay, it is not exactly the dictatorship, because in our system there is a constitution and everybody has some binding, etc. So it is not exactly equivalent to Arrow's definition of dictatorship. However, so something which is close to Arrow's point, we are getting that kind of system in our socio-economic political setup as well. Not exactly similar. The power of that chairman is also restricted using the constitution, using some other things. However, more or less a kind of picture we are getting which is similar to that marked by Arrow. It is the modified version of what Arrow defined. So ultimately, there are again a lot of debates, a lot of development in the write-up in 73, 75. Again, Gibbard is another very important political philosophist who is telling that no system apart from dictatorship can prevent manipulation. Okay, however, they are thinking that this dictator will be the ideal one. Okay, so the question is whether the dictator is ideal or not, and for that matter, actually, we developed a lot of rules and regulations for that dictator, so that the person cannot be the absolute dictator. Okay, so, I just want to tell you something about the evolution. So we came up to this, and then another benchmark is given by Amartya Sen. Okay, I think all of you know that Amartya Sen is our alumni.
Yes, ma'am.
So when you will come back to the department, you will sit in the same bench, same classroom where Amartya Sen used to do the classes. Okay. So, so this is the last benchmark, just a minute. Okay, so Amartya Sen pointed out that conventional economics, or the things so far I mentioned, they focus on utility and commodity consumption. Okay, the limitation of this entire discussion of welfare, how to maximize welfare, what will be the social norm, what will be the social choice in this entire social choice theorem. The problem is we focus too much on utility and commodity consumption. Okay, Sen for the first time argued that we should consider issues of choice along with freedom of choices. Okay, freedom of choices is important. I'm telling that individual is rational, individual can optimize, individual can do this, do that, and therefore the choices are consistent. We are considering all these things, but we are not looking at the fact that whether the individuals are free to choose what they actually want. Okay, so the process of arriving at a point is important, because is it a matter of choice? Is political system or society or economy imposing constraints? In such cases, concepts of entitlements and capabilities to enjoy the entitlements become important. Okay, so I'll focus on the last point. So Sen raised the question whether we are free to choose, or we are facing a political system, a society, or economy which is imposing a lot of constraints among us. Okay. So since actually political system, society, economy impose too many constraints on individual, actually we are not free to choose, isn't it? So Sen emphasized on two things. Entitlements, apart from, instead of considering allocation, Sen is talking about entitlements. When people are casting the vote, the individual is entitled to enjoy this. This much is happening in our system. However, we are not looking at the fact that whether the individual is capable to enjoy this entitlement. We are telling that if you cast your vote, you will get these things, or these things will happen. Okay. However, do I have entitlement to enjoy this kind of education system? Do I have the entitlement to enjoy this kind of health facilities? Do I have the entitlement to enjoy this kind of import-export mechanism? So this question is important. So only entitlement or this allocation should be done. These things will not help us to maximize welfare. We have to look at the fact that whether we are making the individuals capable to enjoy all these entitlements or not. So we should focus on creating capabilities rather than only giving some entitlements. So giving some allocation and fighting over that, which decision rule will get optimum, will actually not benefit the individuals. We have to make the people capable. So, Sen wrote lots of things where he emphasized on generating or improving human capital, enriching the education system as well as the health system, because these are the two most important things which will help us to generate human capital and make the capabilities to enjoy the entitlements. These are the two basic requirements, education and health. Okay, education will empower the individual, people will be able to earn, okay, will be able to decide rationally, able to understand which will be good for them. And another thing is health, which is the capital, which is embodied among the human being, okay, health capital. So these two things are important. So if we can improve the education and the health of the individuals, in that case, it is possible that individuals will become capable to enjoy all these entitlements, okay? So the literature is moving towards that direction. Okay, how we can make the people capable to get the entitlement, whatever has been decided for them. Okay. So this is the journey, this is the, pathway, or, over time using different micro and macroeconomic frameworks, and finally the concepts of development economics. You will learn much about all these concepts, and you will try to, you will be able to understand actually the directions of theory, direction of empirics, how the things should go, how really people will be able to get the optimum allocation, etc. So in 3 years, you will learn all these things, or you will be able to relate these issues with the different concepts.
Is this topic a part of political economy?
Yeah. Okay, and some other things, which you will learn in the journey of your microeconomics. The recent focus of microeconomics is on information economics, so much focus you will get on information system. In this context, you will learn about several things in your third microeconomic course again. Now, conventional methods typically ensure full information on the part of all economic agents. However, the information may be incomplete. Okay, the information may be complete for a certain group, it may be incomplete for other groups. Okay, so, there can be two types of markets. One is market for lemons. Lemons means second-hand goods. Okay, so the example generally here we give, that is the second-hand cars. Okay, so now if you think about the market for the second-hand commodities, especially market for second-hand cars, say, in that case, those who are selling the commodity has full information about the commodity. Okay. However, those who are buying will have always the lesser information. It is very difficult to understand the state of the second-hand commodity, real state of the second-hand commodity. Okay. So in the market for second-hand commodity, never there will be full information on the part of buyers. There will be full information for the sellers. However, there will be always partial or incomplete information for the buyers. Alternatively, if you consider the health insurance market, another typical example, those who are buying the information, buying the health insurance has full information about their health. However, those who are selling has only the partial information, incomplete information, because it is really very difficult to understand the real health state looking at certain medical reports. Okay, so these are two typical examples: market for lemons and market for health insurance. In the first case, sellers have full information, buyers have incomplete information. In the second case, buyers have full information, sellers have limited information. However, there are different markets in between where both the buyers and sellers will have limited information. Buyers may have more information compared to sellers. Sellers may have more information compared to buyers. So different combinations of information may exist between buyers and sellers. So lots of work, lots of research is going on based on information economics, and another thing is nanoeconomics, emphasizing on understanding internal functioning of economic agents. Okay, so broadly we are talking about consumers, broadly we are talking about producers, broadly we are talking about competitive market, oligopolistic market, So nanoeconomics will help us to move from this micro concept to more micro issues, So breaking the micro concepts in several other micro units and taking care of functioning of all those micro units. Okay, so the research, the present research on microeconomics, present focus on microeconomics are mostly based on these issues, information and economics and the nanoeconomics. Okay, so this is all for the introductory part. So now I'll have a break for 10 minutes and we'll have some questions. And if you do not have any question, you can have your lunch as well and then come back by 10 minutes, not a big lunch, only a brief lunch you can have. Okay, and those who have attendance, etc., now I'll take care of those things as well. Okay, just give me 2 minutes.